Hello, this is Pretty Guardian. You are listening to, I guess this is kind of like episode 3 of our Pretty Nerdy podcast. I am here with Derek, aka I am the one who nerds, and the bonus commentary channel here on YouTube. And we are going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves.
Not gonna lie, I got goosebumps when you said that, and I don't know why.
Oh, that's good. A little bit of ASMR in there.
Why don't you tell us about your experience with D&D, and then I'll fill in with for anybody who's missed out.
I think that's great. So for me, it goes back to as a teenager. The first time I played Dungeons and Dragons, it was second edition. And I had a manager at work. When she did her work introductions, she told everybody that she plays Dungeons and Dragons. And I was just like, well, that sounds so fucking fun. I want to play. And she was gracious enough to invite me to her house, to her table, and we ate pizza and played and had a great time. Unfortunately, I didn't get to run a full game with them, but I've just been a fan of the game ever since. I've played a little bit of 3.5, 5e, and some other TTRPGs like GURPS is one of my favorites. But I just love how imaginative the world is. The game can really just be anything that you and your table and your group wants it to be. I love that whole fantasy adventure.
My time playing D&D started right around the time 4th edition started. Some of my buddies got together, and they're like, oh man, have you never played D&D before? And it was high school. I don't know. Like at the time, I grew up in an area not so rural as to like kind of have those real negative connotations. But when you heard D&D at this time, there was still kind of like that, ooh, it's that edgy game, and I was still in high school, so like whatever. And I played it. I'll never forget the sense of freedom I got from basically working my way around a trap. The first session, I was atypical. You're stuck in a dungeon and you gotta break your way out. So like me and my buddies broke our way out. I had a Dragonborn fighter, and he was a total derp, and I kind of want to remake him at some point in 5e. I played it after high school a little bit, and then we kind of had a game so big, it just burnt us all out so quickly. It was a game that was so colossal. There was like 14 people in one DM.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And we learned, less is more. That was where it sat for a while, and then Critical Role came along, and my brain was like, I want to play again. So I picked up a game with some friends. We played through Storm King's Thunder. And as of today, I have 1,200 hours on Roll20. I'm DMing 3 games, in the talks of doing yet another one.
That must keep you busy.
This is the first weekend in a while where both of my games have canceled.
Oh, no.
No, I'm happy about it because, like, I get to a little, mentally, I get to, like, not think of, okay, what's happening this time? What's happening this time? I think we should also address the elephant in the room. Was there a particular incident, let's say, around January?
So with the whole OGL controversy, I will say when the year started, there were so many D&D things that I was looking forward to, like the release of season 2 of Legend of Vox Machina, the D&D movie Honor Among Thieves. Later in the year, we have Baldur's Gate 3. Mentally and emotionally, I was already committed to those 3 events. The OGL, for like that whole thing for me kind of soured the rest of D&D for me. Like I really don't have any sort of faith in like Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro. For me, that's gone. That goodwill that had been built up over the years, completely destroyed. But I was still committed to checking out those 3 things. So I am still invested in that.
I will say this, because I have a feeling that I won't be the only one to say it. With the exception of Honor Among Thieves, Baldur's Gate, I think, is its own separate license. And Critical Role is 1000% its own separate license. Anything Critical Role related is entirely separate from Wizards, save the campaign books that they released. Wizards had to pay them, and then Matt Mercer had to be like, hey dude, so we're gonna have our own writer basically write up this thing. At least that's the way I understand it. The movie is an entirely different thing though. It is under the bridle of Hasbro and Wizards. When Hasbro decides to do something stupid again, you can be like, oh, well, I at least know that I can support Critical Role. I at least know that I can support Lyrian Studios.
That does feel good because I love Critical Role and I love Lyrian Studios.
You know, after playing the little bit of Baldur's Gate that I have, I'm a huge fan. The OGL, man. Oh my God. I had heard rumors of it on like TikTok and I was like, this can't possibly be this bad, right?
You were the first person to tell me about it. And I literally thought the same thing, Derek. I was like, there's no way. It can't be that bad. What? And the more I heard, the more floored I was.
Right? Like, it's such a kick in the dick. That was the thing that surprised me the most, was it just kept getting worse. Like, every time they said something, it felt like corporate nonsense.
Yes.
I doubt any of the Hasbro or Wizards people are going to hear this, so, like, I'm not that worried about it. But, like, how dare they?
How dare they?
Every company is bad. Like, that's a given. To really show your hand and say shit like the customer is an obstacle between us and our money is sickening. Like, it does make it hard for me to be a fan. The way they resolved the OGL, I'm a fan of, which was basically putting it out into Creative Commons, which basically means they can't actually legally pull that crap anymore. So they'll have to find a new way to pull crap. We'll see how that all pans out.
We will see how that pans out. I don't think that they could have resolved this any other way and still salvage their community, though. So I'm kind of like, I think it's great that they did that. And at the same time, they're not rebuilding any bridges with me for having done it, if that makes sense.
It does. To get back on track with the movie, it was this movie I knew was going to be a big thing for them in terms of like investment, time. Them doing that made me go, I'm not going to go see this movie. And I was militant. I was like so against it. And then they eventually raised the white flag and said, okay, we done goofed. We know now. Come on back. And admittedly, that was about the only thing that was keeping me from like willingly going to see this movie. So I'm glad that they had the foresight enough to backpedal or at least do what they did.
Right. So did you have any expectations for this movie as far as what you thought the experience would be like or bits of it that you were looking forward to going in?
So once they did the cast reveal, I was hooked. Honestly, the way it all played out for the most part in terms of like character development, knowing that it was going to be more of a comedy than something as serious as, say, Lord of the Rings or even Critical Role, which is itself very silly and fun. Mm-hmm. But is way more serious than I think we see in this movie. Yeah, I sorry, I'm going to be kind of boring on this one. I was very pleased with what we got. How about you?
I want to like rewind for just a moment. Did you ever see the Dungeons and Dragons movie that came out in the early 2000s?
I am so glad we're going to talk about this.
I feel like we have to because this movie isn't coming into an ecosystem where there had never been a Dungeons and Dragons movie before. So it just seems like a good place for us to start our journey here.
Are you ready for the real mindfuck?
Give it to me.
There were 3 Dungeons. There might be more. There were 3 Dungeons and Dragons movies because that movie got a sequel.
I didn't know it got a sequel. I do remember around 2011-ish, there was another like Dungeons and Dragons movie. If I'm remembering correctly, it was more of like a direct-to-video type sequel.
Oh yes, they were all direct to video. They were equally as terrible. Okay, so I think one of them was a little bit more redeemable, but they all came from that cloth. My mom got it from Netflix. She was like, oh, this has a dragon in it, so I think you would like it. And I was like, oh, I've never heard of it before.
I swear to God, my family did exactly the same thing. Netflix and the whole, oh, this has a dragon in it. You'll probably like it.
They were right. In that, like, I had never seen anything like it before. Like, at the time, I didn't really appreciate film like I do now. But, oh my God, dude. I, like, watching it now, it is aged like a fart. It is
Oh God.
It's hard to think that was supposed to represent Dungeons and Dragons. But it also had, like, weird cameos. The actor who played Riff Raff from Rocky Horror Picture Show was in it.
Oh, that's interesting. So I have not seen the movie in recent times, so this is all working from my memory of it. But at the time, I will say that I liked it. I didn't love it, but it came out for me in a period of time where there wasn't a ton of really great fantasy media. Like, I think this is even before Lord of the Rings came out, not by much, but just by about a year or so. And so it was okay, but I thought the special effects were awful even back then.
Yes, because they were. Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, would come out a year after the original Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Yes, and it looked phenomenally better.
By leaps and bounds. Yes. So yes, I have seen the original. I hope we can do like a watch party together and suffer together because like it makes this movie so much better by comparison.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Let's talk about the cast real quick for
Absolutely.
Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. For the most part, before actually watching the film, I was not a fan of the casting choices. I don't like Chris Pine. I don't think he's cute. I do love Michelle Rodriguez. I think she is wonderful, but she also is kind of a character actress in the sense that she's kind of the tough warrior chick in just about every action movie ever. But there was literally nobody that I was excited for in this movie.
I gotta say, I was on the polar opposite page because I thought Chris Pine, after seeing Into the Woods, was like a fantastic choice as a bard because the man can naturally sing.
Oh,
that was awesome. Michelle Rodriguez playing the barbarian felt like a no-brainer. I didn't know Reggie Jean-Page. Seeing him as a paladin, like it looked great to me. I like Justice Smith from Detective Pikachu. I really like Sophia Lillis in It. I thought she played a very interesting character. Hugh Grant was my giant question mark. I was like, what the hell is he doing here?
he was definitely a giant question mark. So the part two to what I said about not being excited about the cast is that once I actually watched the movie, I really liked them all in their roles. I think Chris Pine played a great bard. I think that Reggie Jean-Page was a wonderful paladin. Justice Smith was great as kind of a bumbling sorcerer who grows into his abilities. Like, just everybody was wonderful. And for me, even Hugh Grant as Forge, I thought he brought a certain credibility to that skeezy character.
Interesting. Because I think, I honestly, between all the other characters, literally all the other characters, I think Hugh Grant might be the weakest link. Okay, so that's not to say anything against Hugh Grant. He felt very out of place the entire film. And I don't feel like they knew what to do with him. I feel like he just said, yeah, I want to do this movie. And then they were just like, okay, we're going to write a roll around it.
So when I was first watching it, I didn't realize that he was going to end up being a villain. For him to... I kind of agree that he was out of place with the party. He didn't really make sense with them. And so when it turned out that he was really just this, like, con artist, I was kind of like, oh, okay, I can see it now. He's just this grifty old, like, skis dude. I don't know. It really made sense to me once it happened.
Fair enough.
But before that, I would have agreed, like, why is he even here? Yeah.
And after seeing it for a second time, like, I do feel... I don't know how to feel about his character. I think Hugh Grant is... But he does have fun. Like, every time he's on set, it seems like he's, like, a total goober, which I love. But in terms of, like, story, I don't know what the hell he's doing there. I mean, besides... the obvious.
I want to like quick shout out Chloe Coleman, Kira, who was the daughter. I thought she was wonderful. And I'm not a big fan of child actors and actresses usually, but she was wonderful. I thought her acting was very natural and her character's role was just perfect. She was great.
I couldn't agree more. As Kira, she felt right in terms of like her relationship with her father. It never felt like it went too extreme in one direction or the other.
Right.
Like there was real pain there. There was real like reconciliation. Her relationship with Olga is amazing.
Yes.
I loved that. She was like, she is the heist. She is the treasure. This actress makes you feel that.
She does.
Let's take a quick minute to talk about our real villain, Daisy Head as Sophina.
Yes, let's do that.
Like, she was awesome. I thought she does an annoyed, like, threat so well. And every time she has to deal with Ford, she's like, God damn it, do you have to speak right now? Are you breathing in the same room as me? How dare you? I loved just the side eye she could pull. Everything she could say in a look to Hugh Grant, she's able to do, which is like, how dare you? But she's also a credible threat to our heroes.
Yes.
I wish we could have seen more of this character, but I appreciate why we don't. What were your thoughts?
I don't even know where to start. Well, so I agree that like Daisy Head did a great job portraying this character and that the character was definitely a credible villain. I will say that like they disgusted me every time that they were on camera. And I don't like quite know how to articulate it all. But it was just kind of, and I'm not saying this in a bad way either. Like, this is not supposed to be a character that you like, per se. But just like everything, like when she stuck her cold little icy finger into his tea, I almost threw up in my mouth just watching that, which is probably perfect, honestly.
And it's so true to her character because she's every chance she gets, she spites him. So that is meant to be disgusting. Even he's like, oh yeah, no, I really wish you hadn't done that. It was so gross. You had mentioned that you've played a little bit of 5th edition. Have you played any of the lore accurate games? Anything in Faerun?
So the like couple sessions that I did were of the Lost Mines of Phandelver.
Okay, awesome. The reason I ask this is because when we start the movie, we start in Icewind Dale.
Yes.
I learned something before the movie had even been released. Chris Perkins had dropped a couple of videos about how the movie came to be. And one of the things he talked about was that prison that the movie starts off in was made for the movie and then was put into Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden, which is a D&D book. So you can theoretically start your party in the same place as Edgin and Holga as we meet them.
Oh.
I thought that was a great beginning to the movie. I haven't played Icewind Dale, so I don't know like all the inner workings of that particular prison. I just know that Chris Perkins had mentioned that that was one of the places you can go.
That's really cool.
Also, like, okay, so I guess at this point, we're going to start talking about the movie proper. So we should probably do some kind of like, some sort of spoiler warning for anybody who was like, oh, I don't know what to say, or I don't want to listen to the movie or their review of what happens plot point by plot point.
This is not a review, okay? We need, oh my gosh, there's a podcast that I follow. And it's almost like what we're doing now, honestly, where it's just like this group of friends and they gush about like movies and stuff. Guilty pleasures.
Can't say I've heard of it.
Okay. Well, so it started out with them like picking out movies that were like a guilty pleasure for them, like stuff that maybe other people didn't like, but they loved. And so then they just kind of got together and talked about how great this obscure film was. And then it slowly started to just be them like gushing about every film that came up. This isn't a review. This podcast is not for people who are trying to decide, should I go see this movie or not? This is for people who have seen it and loved it so much that they wanted to come online and listen to people talk about how much they loved it.
Don't expect me to bash this movie. I had a fantastic time with it. And if you are wondering, maybe if for some reason you clicked on this thinking we were going to review it. Take this opportunity now to know that we're going to tell you to just go see the damn movie.
Yes.
Go see the damn movie. The first fantasy character we see is an orc. And I'll be honest, I forgot that was the first character we saw starting the movie. And just seeing the practical effects, I was so stoked. I was so happy to see practical, not like a full CG creature.
Yes.
Like it's a Paramount feature. This isn't going to be Disney. But like, I was so happy to see something tangible, physical.
I loved that whole beginning sequence as they're like going into the prison and showing some of the different prisoners, many of which were non-human races, which was cool to see. I just thought it was hilarious how we get Chris Pine going before the Board of Appeals. And he's like starting to go into their whole backstory and everything the whole time, like waiting for this Aarakocra to arrive. And the entire time I was thinking, oh, okay, maybe there's something in his story that's going to relate back to the Aarakocra. And that's why this person is going to help get them, like, get their case appealed and get them out of this prison. And the moment the Aarakocra arrive, they literally just grab him and dive out the window. I was not expecting that shit, and I was cracking up the whole time.
It's so D&D. I loved that about every aspect of this movie. Like, these harebrained schemes that should not work, for some reason or another, go off without a hitch. Like, the characters survive without an issue. I loved seeing the Dragonborn, the full practical, and even, like, the mouth movements and everything.
And with his little glasses.
Ah, that was awesome. I loved that. Like that little detail that you don't generally see with Dragonborn in general. I have a character I run in the my Waterdeep games, runs the Bookworm's Treasure.
I usually play him with like this very nasally voice, but I never thought to give him glasses.
So like to see a Dragonborn with glasses was like, oh, that's super cool. Maybe I should be doing that more often with my non-human characters.
It made him human.
Chris's story, or Edgin's story, was such a great start to how this whole movie plays out. It kind of teaches you to be prepared for the way he views the world, I guess.
Right.
And his sense of humor, like him at his worst, him meeting Holga, and them raising Kira together. That was great. And I gotta give it to the writers that they could have gone another way and just made Holga another love interest. I am so glad they didn't do that. Ed and Holga having a non-romantic relationship and something more maternally co-opted, I guess would be a good way of phrasing it.
That was awesome. So what I loved about his friendship with Olga is that you had that like found family aspect there as well as the friendship. There was just a lot that was really wonderful to watch on the screen with that whole dynamic.
Yeah. It felt right. It didn't feel shoehorned. They even, like, I met her at a tavern. Like, that somehow still felt like Holga. It felt like Ed. If we're going into Dungeons & Dragons, like how some things are done, that feels like a connected story. Like two friends getting together and like, oh, well, okay, my character knows your character. And that's that.
That's one of the things that made this movie so much fun throughout the entire thing, is that almost every scene felt very, I'm trying to think of the word, like you could easily imagine this happening at the D&D table.
Yes. To the point, and I mentioned this briefly in my review, I'm convinced, and this is me putting on my tinfoil hat, I'm convinced there is a unseen character throughout the movie who is the dungeon master. I think that there are like situations where like basically anything that kind of feels like a MacGuffin, any dungeon master has been like, oh yeah, well, you messed up this puzzle and now you're quote unquote stuck. So now I'm going to give you this. And I don't want to go too far out in the weeds here. We get the backstory of Ed, how he got caught in the first place the Tablet of Revival, the Tablet of Reawakening, excuse me, which I did not know was a real item in the game until I watched a couple of postmortems on it. So that was kind of interesting. I knew that there were going to be a lot of spells that were lore accurate, but there were some things that I knew were kind of made up for the movie. And I guess, like, yeah, we see spells casted in a unique way that is being live action. We've seen spells in like Critical Role and stuff, but to see it live action, like seeing time stop, was so cool. At first I thought it was slow, the spell slow, but it started like expanding and hitting everyone. I was like, wait, slow doesn't do that. And he calls it time stop, and I'm just like, oh shit, she's so strong.
I did think time stop was really cool. Some of the effects, like with her electricity and stuff, was a little bit too cartoony for me. I was able to kind of go, okay, well, it's a bit of a comedy. I don't need to take the special effects too seriously. But there was more than a few of them that I didn't really love.
Fast forward a bit, Ed and Holga find Kira at Neverwinter, which I'm not gonna lie, it's not a point against the movie. It was me getting myself hyped. I thought we were going to Waterdeep because Waterdeep is my baby. I love that place. I was a little bummed, but like in terms of the story, it made sense. And we know that Forge, played by Hugh Grant, is now running Neverwinter. He's running an entire city, and he's brought back the Sun Games. I've seen the movie twice, and I still can't remember what it's called, which were banned at one point, which obviously anybody who's watched the trailers knows we're going to go there at some point. And we get to see Kira. Oh, we should also talk about their pendant, because that ends up being kind of important later.
Yeah, so they show Holga giving her a pendant early on in the film that allows her to go invisible.
I loved that. That was so much fun. I'm so glad. Like, I knew it was going to come back later, but I didn't know that they were going to play it that way.
Good that they brought it back, because then it became kind of a Chekhov's gun rather than just being a random throwaway.
We find out Forge had set them up basically to fail. He's been brainwashing Kira for the last 2 years. Yeah, so that's kind of where like the movie finally gets its stamina. We get that great fight scene where Michelle Rodriguez basically shoulders the responsibility of beating the shit out of like 12 dudes. Yeah, seeing a barbarian rage like that was fun, and her getting that axe was great.
The main driver of the film is that we have a heist adventure where Ed needs to break into Neverwinter Castle and get back his daughter. And so to do that, he has to put together a crew, and he also has to kind of convince them of the value of this. So they use the games where all the treasure from all the merchants and lords and stuff who are going to be gambling on these games and stuff. They're bringing all that treasure into Neverwinter. So he also uses that as a vehicle to kind of convince his sorcerer buddy and put this crew together to do this heist.
We get the crew together. I liked seeing a sorcerer that wasn't fully realized yet. Kind of seeing, because like sorcerers in the game, when compared to other classes, are like born naturally gifted, and they're glass cannons for the most part. To see this character still not sure of himself was an interesting idea, and I think was really well realized by not only Justice Smith, but the writing as well.
I feel like in most fantasy stuff that I watch, the mage in the party is usually not fully realized. In The Last Unicorn, that little wizard that goes along with them, he's still kind of getting his shit together. In the early 2000s D&D movie, the wizard that they had wasn't really that great or that useful. To me, it was just kind of, I've seen it.
Fair enough. Won't lie. You were expecting it. I guess I was thinking more in terms of like how I see them in the game usually. But you were absolutely right in like, yeah, usually the wizard character is the one who's a little bit more fumbly.
For me, what was really visually interesting was Doric having a druid in the party.
Absolutely. I liked seeing just how ham they would go with a druid in this movie. That whole one shot where she's constantly flipping through her wild shapes was so much fun to watch. It was so good. And like to go back and forth with like the actress and then go into like a CG a creature that turns into another creature. And they're still constantly chasing her. Was a lot of fun. I thought that was brilliant. I don't know who thought of that scene, but they were not paid enough. We discover that, one, they established the Seal of Mordenkainen, which for people who haven't played the game or know the lore that well, Mordenkainen is basically trans-dimensional Doctor Strange. And they're like, when they just like casually drop, oh yeah, it's Mordenkainen. That's a big deal. So I felt like Justice Smith, where he was like, oh, well, now you're screwed because there's no way you're going to be able to get around this. Unless, of course, we get a MacGuffin. And sure enough, MacGuffin exists. The way that they have to get the MacGuffin is through a helmet of disjunction. That it actually ends up being, again, had to watch a video on it. There was a spell. There's Mordenkainen's disjunction was a spell. So they put that spell essentially into a helmet and used it as this basically way to get around something as powerful as Mordenkainen himself. They had to use another Mordenkainen spell to basically cancel it out. And then we know that we have to go to the Evermoors now to go talk to a dead body, which that whole conversation between them is like, is gold. It's like, why don't you just magic the money away? Or not magic the money away. You could always magic the paycheck away. I'm going to let you take the lead on this bit where we meet Olga's hubby, or ex-husband.
Oh, okay. So during their adventures, they stop by the town that Olga is from, and she wants to drop in and see her former halfling husband. And this was a cameo with Bradley Cooper. And so he played her husband. And they just had kind of a nice little heart-to-heart in their house where it kind of comes out that she had left her barbarian tribe to be with him. And then she was kind of so lonely and feeling bad about being exiled and away from her friends and family that she kind of took to drinking a lot more and was not a good partner to him. And so it kind of ruined her relationship with him, and she was left with nothing after that. It was a very like sad backstory, but it was also really good to see them have this moment of just being able to connect honestly and like adults with each other.
And I have to say, that's a scene that really stood out to me. It felt kind of like they were setting up a joke of her like throwing him out a window or something. That's kind of what like a lot of that awkward silence read to me as, like, oh, they're gonna make her beat him up or something, but like to be so sincere about it all and to give her the closure that she had been looking for all this time. I gotta applaud the writers on that. It was unexpected but very pleasant. I liked that. Also, again, that was shot practically. There was no CG in that shot. They used the same techniques that they use in Lord of the Rings. Like Bradley Cooper was sitting in a very large chair at a certain distance, but Michelle Rodriguez was sitting closer to camera, or vice versa. But they've got that table in the middle. But like when you watch it again, because I know you're gonna go see the movie again, you can actually see that forced perspective at play in that shot. And each time I watch it, I'm always very happy. Like, yay, more practical. That bit was beautiful. I thought that was very, very well done, and it felt right. I'm glad they gave that moment to Holga.
It did feel right. So a moment that I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. So they're going on, like you had called the helmet a MacGuffin, and I guess maybe technically it is. For me, it didn't feel like one because there were so many steps to this elaborate quest that they had to go through, like going to the graveyard and digging up all the bodies and talking to them, and then meeting the paladin and going to like the Underdark. Like there was just so much that they had to do to get that fucking helmet. And then once he has the helmet, the sorcerer still has to attune to it. So it wasn't this like save the day device that it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
But One of the parts that felt very forced to me was when Doric joined their group. Although, like, I can see how the Lord of Neverwinter would be encroaching on their territory and everything. There was nothing really shown up until that moment of her going, okay, I'm going to join the party, where she looks out the window and sees the deforestation happening. There was nothing for me really that like set that up. It was just like, oh, well, he's my enemy too, so I'm going to join you. And I didn't really like that.
I can appreciate that, but I would say, yeah, I would agree that she does feel like it. She does feel like she didn't necessarily have to go on this quest, but she's choosing to because. Okay, so we get to now talk about the the scene that was really put into a lot of the trailers. The Speak with Dead spell. I've been so tempted to pull this same chicanery on my players, where they're like they ask questions around the person that is supposed to be answering questions, and then just kind of use it against them for fun. And they had unlimited retries, essentially, because they had the coin. It never really ran out. It was also kind of fun to see the tracking of this particular item during a large-scale battle. Seeing the dragon cultists. I loved it. And kind of following the helmet around through the visage of all these dead men and like watching them die. They basically, they then establish Reggie Jean Page's paladin character as being like this holier than thou, like this is the guy you want to talk to. We fast forward to that where he pulls the baby tabaxi out of the fish's mouth. Oh, they really hammed it up for, and like anybody who's ever played a paladin knows, they can totally be like this. It's so funny. More practical effects with the giant fish, the tabaxi. I loved seeing that. We get another Dragonborn cameo.
The part that I want to talk about is that fat dragon that they all ran from.
Thumbershard.
Oh, yes, is that his name?
Yes, that is his name. And again, had to look him up. He's a fictional, he does exist outside of this movie in a book called Out of the Abyss. He wasn't always as pudgy. Like that was kind of fun to see a fat dragon, right?
For me, it was subverting expectations in a way. Like people tend to think of dragons as being a certain type of deadly. And while there was definitely a threat from this dragon, it was also very hilarious to watch him like roll around eating people and kind of stumbling his way through this really engaging chase scene.
God, it was so much fun. Like I watched it, when I saw it again, I was like, I feel like I watched him stumble more on my second watch. Like just like this roly-poly little dumb dragon. But like, yeah, he's a real threat though. Like belching fire, he's eating dudes left and right because the paladin the party gets hunted by a Witchblade warlock and that whole bit. But honestly, like you want to talk about iconography? Like this dragon is in more posters. I swear to you. I work in Burbank, and the buses, all the buses have Thumbershard chewing on the bus. It's so awesome. I love seeing this different type of dragon. Yes, absolutely subverting expectations, giving the audience something they never see, which was a brilliant touch. I guess we can kind of like fast forward to like the whole beach sequence. Long story short, Justice Smith Simon can't adjust to his or tune to his helmet. The party kind of has a crisis of faith until they kind of rally around one another in the fact that if they give up, they truly will remain failures, which I thought was, again, kind of a more interesting way of looking at the situation than I think other movies might have done, or even this movie.
For me, what made that scene very impactful is that's also where we see Ed admit for the first time that he was a terrible father, that he is a failure for that. For me, thinking back to the beginning with Kira when they're about to go on that first heist where they get caught and sent to Icewind Dale, she literally came up to him and was like, we have no reason to do this. Like, there's no reason for you to take this risk. We have plenty of money. We have everything we need right here. And knowing that, he still chose to leave her. And that's pretty fucked up. Like, when you really think about it, like, he chose this possibility. I mean, I understand that he was trying to get his wife back, but ultimately he could have died and just left her on her own forever. And he kind of, I mean, he left her in a pretty shitty situation, like being taken by Forge. Like, yeah, okay, she was kind of treated like a princess, but also she didn't have her family. And he's a pretty skeezy dude that would sell her out in a heartbeat. So it was just, it was a really shitty thing to do. And then when they go to Neverwinter and she sees him, he does try to kind of play it off as if it's everything else but him that's causing all these issues. Well, no, Ed, it's you. You've got some shit you need to work out, and you're hurting the people closest to you.
Again, really poignant. I feel like Chris Pine really does this character justice, where I at least saw myself like sympathizing with like the idea, but the execution was done poorly, or rather, I guess well, no, it's both pretty terrible. I mean, in terms of like the character, like his rationale, like him rationalizing, like he's hurting and he wants his wife back. So obviously he's going to do the thing that, but he's looking at what could be as opposed to what's already in front of him. And yeah, it's at this point that he begins to realize all the mistakes he's made, even as early as like 2 days prior. So that was great. And I feel like that scene was the reason they got Chris Pine, because he does it so well. He does it very phenomenally. And we get to see again, D&D hijinks done fantastically. Oh, they get a piece of treasure to go and hide amongst the other vast wealth that will be at Neverwinter in the form of like, I don't know who that is. I feel like that painting is meant to be somebody, maybe somebody on the D&D writing staff or something. But like they cut out this painting and they use the hither thither rod, which is basically a portal gun, like complete with the sound effect. That was a item they had to make up for the movie, but they have their actual stats for it, and I would not be surprised if in the coming days we'll see a hither thither staff implemented into the game properly. But they sneak this piece of treasure in so they can basically portal themselves into the treasure room in case Simon can't attune to his magical unlocking device. The Helm of Dysfunction. I did the Michelle Rodriguez joke by accident. The Helm of Disjunction.
I liked Helm of Dysfunction. That was on point.
I had so much fun with that scene. As per usual with D&D schemes, it goes to shit.
I loved that scene too. That whole there were so many moving parts to it. Like, we had the druid. So once the portal painting was inside of the vault, it actually fell so that it was flush with the ground. And so they weren't even able to use that portal gun to actually get in the way that they had intended to. And so we had the druid trying to like carve into the stone so that she can just get a little bit of space in there so that she can actually go through the portal. Meanwhile, we had them going through, like, what were they on, plan D or whatever? Like, by the time they were getting through this heist. And so the whole thing was just a lot of fun. It was a great scene.
Something I didn't notice until my second run through of the movie was how good the editing is in the sequence. It was really good because there's a bit where Doric is like, she's chipping away at the flooring of the portal. She's trying to like clear the area, so she puffs out a poof of dust to kind of clear the work area. And when she does that, in that same space, there like Michelle Rodriguez then throws like something else that's very particly or like that kind of like looks like smoke at a dude, and then they go into her fight scene. and like it transitions so well. Like I didn't catch it my first time, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. They put actual time and effort into this. Also, the soundtrack in this part, I don't know why, but it stood out to me. The like almost like barbarian.
Oh
chanting.
yeah, the soundtrack did kick up in that part.
I remember that. That was fantastic. But yeah, the party all gets caught. The Displacer Beast seeing Kitty Whippins was again. We knew it was coming because of the trailers, but holy shit, I didn't think they were gonna realize it as hard as they did.
I have complex thoughts on it. So there were aspects to it that were a lot of fun, like seeing the beasts and the mimic of the treasure chest. I thought that was really cool. The gelatinous cube I thought was kind of fun as well. To me, the scene didn't really, like, I feel like they could have cut that entire thing out and the plot would have been just the same for it. Like, I don't know. It didn't do anything for me.
Okay. I can understand that. I just thought it was fun. Like, it was a way for them to, I saw it as a way for the group to not die. Like, they had every reason to be killed. This was kind of a weird bout of revenge for Sofina, because everything she had thrown at them had ultimately failed. So this was like a last-ditch effort, because apparently this game guarantees death, which obviously it doesn't. I feel like that was the reason we got it. But
I mean, it must guarantee death, because when Sofina starts like releasing her red smog of death upon the city, none of the heroes from the games did anything to stop her.
It's a very good point. Yeah, so
for me, that was like a glaring plot hole. Like the whole party comes back to stop her. But it's like you're in Neverwinter. There's not a single hero or champion here. Like, come on.
That was kind of a weird idea, but I guess like they have to have the main characters be the heroes. But at that same point, yes, like in the realm of D&D, there should have been at least two parties. But maybe they were dead in the Neverwinter games. The party beats Forge, and they get Kira back, and Ed does a proper apology, sort of. I gave you a real apology, but I accidentally gave it to to Sofina. I'm sorry. that was such a great delivery for me. And yeah, it turns out that Sofina is trying to raise an army of the dead by killing all the people in the arena. We get to see very briefly, in pretty gruesome detail, the high rollers, or the people that are betting high on the games. They go first, which raised a question for me of like, okay, so these are like high profile people in their cities. Like, I wonder if like there's going to be some sort of economic downturn because they're fucking dead.
Well, if anything, there would be an economic upturn because they had been hoarding the wealth for so long.
For the people of Neverwinter, not necessarily the people of Waterdeep, because the Baldur's Gate and yeah. But who knows? Maybe they won't touch on that in the sequel. Anyway, a wonderful fight ensues using spells aplenty, and okay, so I feel like if we talk about every fucking spell used, we'll be here for another hour. So, like, were there any standouts for you?
I wouldn't say that there were any standouts as far as the spells being used themselves. Like, there were a lot of like cool things happening in that scene. My favorite part was where they are all as a team fighting against Sofina, where they're all just like right there in melee range, using their spells, using everything they can. Ed is fucking hitting her over the head with his lute. Like, I just thought that was so much fun to watch. It was really a good fight.
Yeah, the fluidity of that scene in particular was awesome. It felt like it belonged in a kung fu movie, like the way it was done. I have to say, some of my favorites were seeing Bigby's hand realized in two entirely different ways. meteor swarm to start everything off, which I've almost killed my players using. So I was like, I know you. I know what you look like. Animate object, of course, for the stone dragon thing. And I also like that we get to see a sorcerer lose their concentration and what that looks like, and which is basically the object goes inert. But yeah, we get this great fight, and at the end, when Doric basically delivers the killing blows, I guess you could say. Please tell me what was going through your mind when that happened.
It was very reminiscent of the first Avengers film where
Yes.
Hulk grabs Loki and just starts smashing the shit out of him like a rag doll. That's what that gave me. I thought it was really hilarious to watch visually, this owl bear just literally smashing Sophina around, throwing her up against the wall, beating her into a pulp.
I thought the exact same thing about the Hulk sequence, but I think they did it better in the fact that we know she's not coming back. Because that bit where she just grabs and throws her up against the corner and she just kind of slams against the ground like, oh, well, maybe she can survive. And then the stone just... oh, God. Yeah, no, she's definitely dead. There's no coming back for the sequel. Well, maybe. Who knows? But yeah, it turns out that Holga got stabbed by the Red Wizard Blade, which is established that when you get stabbed by that, your soul actually gets sucked out of your body and destroyed by the blade. If somebody tried to use like a resurrection spell on her, it wouldn't work. So I'm going to throw this one on you. What were your thoughts during this whole sequence?
So I did cry when Holga died. For me, it was a very sad scene, especially with Kira being right there next to her. In a sense, Holga's the closest thing to a mother figure that Kira's known in her life. And so for her to lose Holga would be absolutely devastating. And you have this moment where we've kind of seen Ed realize that maybe he has really failed as a father to Kira. And he now has the tablet of reawakening that he can use to bring his wife back. But he's learned to appreciate the life that he has and to kind of see the treasure in front of him, which is Kira and her happiness. And so he brings back Holga. And I just thought it was a really beautiful moment. You could see like the little dragonfly that came down on his hand. This was kind of a reoccurring motif between him and his wife. So you can kind of gather from that this sort of decision comes with her blessing in a way as well. It was a beautiful scene.
Oh, absolutely. Again, right there with you. I have no notes. Chloe Coleman did an amazing job. Actually, all three of them did. It's been a while since I've seen Michelle Rodriguez do a death scene, and like that whole group does it with like such a realness of like. I mean, we as the audience, or at least I did. We know that Edgin has the thing that he needs to bring her back, but the way it's performed and delivered was so well executed that like even on my second time watching, like it was still pretty hard to like, it was still very emotional when they're singing Ed's song as kind of like a goodbye. It's like, oh God, you guys are just like, I've been stabbed by the Red Wizard's blade. You guys are trying to kill me.
I was going to say that when I think about this movie as a whole, there are certain things that I might have a quibble with, like certain parts that might feel forced or whatever else. But when I really think about it, I laughed, I cried, I had an amazing time. For me, this was a really good film.
I had so much fun, and I never get to experience this in this day and age where I go and see a movie for a second time and I have more fun seeing it a second time. And I did. Like, when I saw it initially, I saw it preview night, and there were, like, I was surrounded by nerds, and, like, for everybody to kind of, like, appreciate the movie together. There was something different about this most recent showing I just watched where, I don't know, maybe it's because I knew it was coming or what, but, like, I feel like I enjoyed it more the second time around, and I don't know what it is. This is a great movie. I gave it a 9 out of 10, and I still stick to that. There are some like my quibbles are exactly that. They are minute. Sometimes the writing feels a little bipolar, or even like maybe a little, even like in some instances, like when Simon attunes to the helmet, when he just openly says, "Oh well, I guess I was just getting in my own way." That kind of like snaps me out of it. But like the second we get back into the plot, I feel like the movie grabs me by the shoulders. It's like, wake up! We need you back in the movie. So like they're so small, and that's kind of what keeps me from giving it like a 10. That said, like I have an amazing time with this movie. I'm looking forward to owning it and really dissecting it shot for shot and seeing what was put in there. But yeah, that I agree. This was an amazing experience. I wasn't expecting it to be this good, and I'm very glad.
Yeah. 2022, last year, was a rough year for me as far as movies go. There were a few really good ones, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. But then there was just a lot of the same old, like, Marvel bullshit. And just in general, for me, it wasn't a great year for movies. And so now coming into 2023, this movie actually makes me hopeful for what future cinema is going to look like, because it's kind of reminded me of like, oh, okay, people can make fun movies that are actually good like this. So I am excited to own it too. And it's definitely one I'll be revisiting in the future.
And I gotta say, to whatever executives went ahead and greenlit this took balls. This, like, I stand by this statement. This is a very unique film in the way that, like, it's this high fantasy. Like, you're not gonna go into a movie theater now to potentially the end of the year and see anything quite like this. And that takes guts, I think, should be applauded, because at the end of the day, we, as an audience, we're used to the same old crap. So when we get something like this, something that's new and fresh, we're going to pounce on it, guys. Just don't oversaturate the market like I'm afraid you're trying to do already with the TV show you've already announced on Paramount Plus. And I think there's already like 3 other things already in the works. I will say that this was awesome. I'm looking forward to a direct sequel. This was great.
And thank you so much for joining me today to talk about it.
The pleasure is mine. Like, I love being able to gush about a movie, especially one that, like, hit me this way. I don't have to, like, bring my thoughts down to a minute or, like, a TikTok-y, like, 3 minutes maybe. So, like, to gush openly and discuss and point out things and have fun with it. So thank you. This was great. I loved being able to talk about it with you. Okay, so I guess with that, what would you like to see in a Honor Among Thieves sequel?
So I want a D&D movie sequel. I don't want an Honor Among Thieves sequel. I would rather they move to a different part of the world, focus on a different group of characters, and maybe set something up. Like, this one was very reminiscent of a heist movie. Maybe there could be one that's more like a spy movie, or one maybe kind of use this as a setting to take on different genres and look at the way that different tables play the game as well, and kind of incorporate those. And I think it would be just a really fun setting to revisit.
Interesting. I definitely agree. And I think with that in mind, you can easily build your own cinematic universe. I know I hate saying it too, but let's say what it is. Like, that's going to make the kids money, so they're going to try and do it that way.
And you're right, they can. This D&D is such a rich franchise that has so much untapped potential at this point.
Absolutely. Yes. Like a direct sequel with these same characters. I get the sensation that Reggie Jean-Page might become like an Oathbreaker paladin. Like, there's a lot, like, they keep like focusing on his eyes and stuff. So I wonder if they're going to do like a shift in his personality, and maybe they have to like steal his original soul back or something. Like another heist movie where the treasure isn't necessarily the point, or at least, yeah, financial gain. But yeah, that like for like a direct sequel or something.
I
quite a
would
lot.
love for there to be like a time skip, like maybe like wait a few years for the next film to come out and have it maybe centered on Kira and she's like a skilled rogue of some sort and maybe see Simon as an actualized sorcerer at that point.
That would be dope. Well, I guess we should go ahead and wrap this up because we've been at it for way too long. Again, Maggie, thank you so much for letting me gush and bullshit with you for a little while.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for listening along. It was definitely a fun video to make.
Yeah, I genuinely appreciate the likes, the comments, the thumbs up. And you know, like again, if this was something you guys like, we need to see these things so that way we know to keep doing it. And I guess on that note, we'll catch y'all in the next one.